Maniac here with GameAccess.net. Apologies for the weird lighting, but I kind of been wanting to do some of this stuff. I've been kicking around, given the fact that there's really not that much gaming news coming on, and it's possible that for the rest of the year, there may not be that much gaming news. You know, with E3's cancellation and things like that due to the current world events. I've been less frequent in video postings. I've been writing a lot, but I haven't really been doing a lot of videos. But I have been kicking around a couple of ideas for things like upcoming Mind of Maniacs. And I've recorded one or two, and I haven't really been happy with them. But I kind of wanted to bring it to you guys as to, would you guys like to see those kind of videos coming up? Like I said, I have one or two in the back burner that I could post if I really wanted to. Because again, there's really not that much gaming news going on. And I've got a couple of really fun stories to tell about my experiences, gaming related and personal related, that I'd be more than willing to share with you guys. There has been a recent, how do I put this? There's been a recent video series of basically viral videos that I saw, certainly before this this took, this has become the current normal of the world. I have seen a couple of videos go viral where guys would basically park their butts in like Walmarts and stuff and basically play video games to see how long they could do that. And I kind of got a kick out of that for one serious reason, but I was shocked by how popular it was for one really funny reason. I did that first. And unfortunately, I don't have video evidence of it. And my witnesses, I don't know if like I said, they're all scattered to the winds right now, so who knows. But I swear to you, it's true. And I'll tell you one of those stories right now if you guys would like to hear it. Back in 2006, a game called Gears of War was released on the Xbox 360. I had an Xbox 360. I was tremendously looking forward to that game, and I would end up picking up a copy of it around November of that year. I just didn't play it, at least not at first. And the reason why I didn't play it was because I had the Red Ring of Death. And that was not fun. And I was in the process of dealing with the fallout of the Red Ring of Death at around the same time Gears of War was out, so I basically had to wait a bit. But I had a friend that also had an Xbox 360, and his hadn't red ringed yet. It would later red ring about a year later, but his hadn't red ringed yet. And he also wanted a copy of Gears of War. And at around the same time, he was working in a electronics store, I guess would be the best. It wasn't like Best Buy or anything like that. It was a small mom and pop television store. Basically, they sold TVs and all different types of TVs. And this was just at around the time when the HD television revolution was coming on. And the best TV that you could get was like a 1080p DLP TV, or they had, of course, there were no LED TVs at the time, but there were LCD TVs and plasma TVs, and projection TVs were still around, and projectors were still around. And so he was currently in the process of basically working at a TV shop where he was, selling TVs. And he was in the market at the time because he was making some good money from that. He was interested in buying himself a brand new top-of-the-line high-definition television. Now, the fun part about that was that because this was a mom and pop, the people who worked there all knew him. And if I happened to go, whether he was working there or not, and I said his name, people would know who I was talking about, and they would know that I was a friend of his. That sort of thing, basically. So everybody got along very well. I got along, he and I, of course, have been long-term friends, and we're still friends, obviously, to this day. But we of course, had a repertoire, and of course, we were all playing games on the Xbox 360 at the time. So the way that this store was all set up was that there were rows and rows of TVs, all different types of TVs set up across, a bunch of shelves and cabinets and stuff. And everything was a different model. And they organized it the way they did, plasmas, LCDs, stuff like that. They organized them by price. They organized them by model maker. But they had a policy. And this is a policy that, and part of the reason why I'm doing this video is because I've been getting a lot of comments on my how-to videos, and everybody's got the same problem. They're buying the wrong TVs. But this store had the people that post those comments or those problems had an out to that, and that was is that if you were to come in and buy a television, or certainly come out to test televisions, they had no problem with you bringing in your equipment to make sure that your equipment worked with the television. Now, back then, that was less of a problem than it is now. It's a huge problem right now because there are a lot of TVs out there that basically lack older inputs, or they require hoops to jump through to get those older inputs to work. And a lot of people that have older equipment simply can't take the time or aren't paying attention to what they're seeing. But this store said, if you have a piece of equipment, even if it's an old piece of equipment, and you want it, and your intention is to buy a TV and use that piece of equipment, whatever it is, you can bring that piece of equipment in. No, we're not going to warranty it. It's your equipment. But if you want to plug it into one of our TVs and see how it looks, be our guest. And that's where this story begins, because my friend was in the market for a new 1080p television, which had just come out at the time, and the Xbox 360s had just released an update just before or just around the time that Gears of War first came out. They released an update so that while the Xbox 360s lacked HDMI ports at the time, they would later be added, but that's neither here nor there. You could get 1080p video through the cables. And we were basically ready to test that. And we had Gears of War. So my friend and I go into the store, and he wants to start looking at televisions. Now, the way this whole system was set up, everything was basically showing the same screen. I don't know where they got the footage that they got from. It might have been satellite, but basically what would happen is that they were showing like HD demo video, probably 1080i HD demo video, that they were probably getting from like HD Theater channel and stuff like that, because but basically it was all video. It was all HD video. Now, don't get me wrong. This was a big deal at the time because even at that time, a lot of even major stores were not putting video content on their, or at least not decent quality video content on their demo televisions, and so people were simply just ignoring them. They're like, "What's the point of me buying this screen if it's black or full of static? I can't see how." Visually, I can't see how that's any different than the TV that I have currently, other than the fact that it might be bigger, or it might say that it's better, but I can't see that with my own two eyes. So my friend brought his Xbox 360 in with a copy of Gears of War. I don't remember if I brought the copy or not. Don't quote me on that. And a controller. And with the permission of the people that worked there, plugged in his Xbox 360 to one of the TVs he was looking at buying, and started playing Gears of War, the very first Gears of War. Now, my friend was absolutely horrible at playing it. It was, if you could treat it as a Let's Play, it was probably the worst Let's Play ever. Although I should talk, that probably seemed worse. But what was happening was that the game was so good, and because we could get the video to output in 1080p on that television, which was designed, it was like, this was not a cheap TV. These TVs were probably anywhere between $1,200 and $2,000 at that time. Just to tell you how, I know that may not sound as much, but at that time, that was for a top-of-the-line TV. That was a good, that was what they cost. And I ended up later buying a TV maybe 2 years later for about $1,300. So that just goes to sell you. I bought one a few years ago for $5. So where's that, Needless to say, Gears of War was new. So he starts playing the game. I'm watching him. I'm making sure everything is working because, of course, I'm technical. I can plug these things in and make sure that they work quickly. He's happy with the video. We're looking at the TV. Everybody in the store, patron and employee, starts hovering around us. Because this is probably the first time in the store's entire history that amazingly good, because if anybody's ever seen Gears of War, like footage of the original Gears of War, I cannot stress this enough, that this was without a doubt the best looking game on the Xbox 360 at that time. In fact, some would probably argue that it was the best looking game, period, at that time. This was 2006. The graphics were amazing. The art style was amazing. It looked better than any game that was on the market. Now, of course, good-looking games has kind of become standard, but at that time, this was a game that really pushed the graphical fidelity. Lighting effects. That Unreal 3 engine at that time was top of the line. And so, what are we looking at right now? Everybody, and of course now at this point, some of the clerks are noticing us, and they don't have a problem. Again, they're not angry at what we're doing. They're not mad at us, nothing like that. But what they are is curious, because they had not played the games yet either. Some of them didn't have 360, some of them hadn't had time to pick up the games yet. They all wanted to play. So we just started rotating the controller around. I was probably the best that first time. I admit that. But none of us could get past the first areas because the game was hard. So, true story, the clerks, for whatever reason, I don't know why, maybe it was because they wanted to get us off the, the heavy trafficked, aisles, get us out of the aisles. They said, you need to plug in elsewhere. We have a special showroom, which was a large theater, probably around the size, it was sequestered off. It was like probably the size of somebody's living room. If you had a decent sized living room, it was about that size. It was carpeted, it had sectionals and couches, and it had the most expensive televisions in the entire store. I'm not kidding. They had a 110-inch projection Mitsubishi television, 1080p. They had a 65-inch Sony DLP TV. They had a high-definition 2K projector. All of them had surround sound. They were full, full stereo, Dolby surround sound setups. And they were basically just setting up the only content that they were putting through it was like the movie Taxi and like whatever they could pull from the satellite set-top boxes. Not really visually stunning content. So we come in with our Xbox 360 and our copy of Gears of War and all our cables and everything, and they tell us, plug into the back. This is a splitter system. So I guess the way the store worked is that they had an analog splitter system basically feeding to all the TVs in that area. So they told us where the system was. They said, plug into this, and we could sit down on the couches and play on we picked the biggest TV, the 110-inch. So it took me a few minutes to basically get all the connections together, everything. The way the splitter was set up, unfortunately, I couldn't get sound through analog. I had to plug in through optical. No big deal there. We couldn't get 1080p out of that section, but we could get 1080i. My guess is that splitter was only rated for 1080i. It was an older splitter. It was analog. So again, this wasn't before HDMI, but HDMI was just starting to become, or wasn't really standard yet. It wouldn't be standard for another year. So we couldn't get digital video out of it, but we could get high definition analog. And we could get optical audio, surround sound audio. We sit down, I get a picture, we start getting the rumble from the 360 for the sound. The controllers are working, we plug the game back in, and we start playing the opening to Gears of War. In this store, all the TVs in this entire room, and it's a large room, and nobody sequestered us off, meaning people can just come in. And we start playing. When somebody dies, we pass the controller on. Somebody dies, we pass the controller on. All of a sudden, an elderly couple walks into the section and sits down at the 65-inch Sony TV. Again, like I said, there were couches in front of all the TVs. This was a demo room. And unfortunately, the store's closed, so I can't show you pictures of it. But needless to say, what ends up happening is that they start watching. And then, after maybe at least 5 minutes, they look over at us. And then they look over at the TV, and they look over at us, and they realize that they've been had. The gentleman of the couple looks at me and says, "This is you. You're doing this." He points at the screen. He's like, this is not real. This is something you're doing. And we kind of just say, yeah, this is us. This is what we were doing this. This is a game. And the guy, I swear this is what he said. "Oh, thank goodness. We thought we were watching the Iraq War." These people were probably 80. They get up, we nod our heads, and they walk away. They walk away. I don't know if they ended up buying a TV or not, but needless to say, we were kind of proud of ourselves, actually, a little bit. We ended up sticking around there till closing. They wouldn't let us leave because we were just having too much fun. My friend didn't end up buying any. Of course, he didn't end up buying the most expensive televisions. I think I convinced my father. This is true. I convinced my father later on when he was in the market for a television to buy that Sony DLP. We had it as a TV for probably around good five years at least. It did pretty good for us. He later sold it and bought something smaller, meaning thinner, lighter. Because those DLPs they worked. They had good picture. They certainly had the best picture at the time, but they had there were quirks with them, and they were big and they were heavy. So he wanted to switch up with something smaller, and by that point LEDs were available, and he ended up switching to that. Needless to say, that was a fun night. If I had to list like what were some of my funnest nights in the history of my gaming experiences, that was probably one of them. And I'm pretty proud of that story. And of course, maybe about half a month to a month later, my 360 comes in. First game I pop in is Gears of War. I beat that eventually. And then, I became a Gears of War fan ever since. I haven't beaten Gears of War 5 yet, but I have started it. And, well, needless to say, that's the story. If you had any comments about Fallout from that, there wasn't any. Like I said, I later bought a TV from them. My father later ended up buying it, earlier than that, before I did. My friend later bought a TV through them. They were not mad at us. My guess is, and this is my theory, and maybe you can disagree with me on this, they were selling TVs. What we were doing was selling TVs. That's just my theory. You can disagree. Post a comment below if you did. But that's basically what happened. So hope you guys enjoyed the story. If you want to see more of these stories, some of them are shorter, some of these are longer, please post a comment if with your opinion on that. Until next time, guys, my name is Maniac with GameAccess.net.